Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 3. Uh, Please turn on your cameras if you're here. I hope you're here. Right, so I see Ray, Lisa, Jared, Fernando, and Jay, Tommy, Miley, Josie, Joshua, Scotty, and if you haven't already, could you go to the attendance sheet and mark your attendance, please? Let me see you're here. Good. Awesome. Cool. So let's start. So first of all, I hope everyone is doing okay. Um, Things are getting slightly better pandemic-wise. So hopefully there's an end in sight. As far as the course goes, um, today's material, like not today, but this week's material is going to be lighter than last week's materials because last week we introduced many things and it could be overwhelming, especially for people who are not familiar with research and research concepts. So this week we're just going to focus on one component of research, that is the literature review, which you would see, as I mentioned before, in on almost every research article and every research article that is following the empirical paradigm. So to remind you, the academic papers, we talk like you have an abstract, introduction, literature review, method results, discussions, and implications. Today we're going to focus on, or this week we're going to focus on those two things, introduction and literature review. So the introduction, which I'm not going to spend a lot of time on because I believe you know what the function of introduction is in any essay you have written or any essay you've analyzed. The introduction is introducing the reader to the concepts you are about to discuss. So you tell them what you're going to tell them. For academic articles in particular, so in non-academic articles, you'd maybe start with a story or a quote, right? Like some of the tricks that probably you've learned in English 101. But for research paper, you rarely see that. What you would do in an introduction is just trying to show why important your research is of whatever topic you pick. So let's say the effect of, of mobile apps on workout intensity. And more particularly, if you're talking about, the running apps like the one by Nike and others, you want to see if that have an effect on people's performance, right? Do they keep up with the running, or like do they follow, or like they meet the targets they put for themselves? Anyhow, if you're writing an article about that, the introduction will be about introducing why is this a real phenomenon. So you will gather some news pieces, say, oh, here's the number of downloads per month, or like it has been gaining much attention for the last 5 years, right? And you can talk about smartwatches or like Fitbits, things like that, right? So why is this issue worth investigating your time in, right? So you're telling that to the reader. And then it has to be something being portrayed in a very exciting way. So you want to grab the reader's attention. So you mentioned something that everybody knows in a sense. So this, you could say this relates to multiple trends in technology and technology getting into our daily life. And you can mention maybe some celebrity endorsers who got into it. You can mention TV shows talking about these apps. You know, the tricks you learn in academic writing in general, or even creative writing. With that, then establishing that this topic is important and exciting and relevant, you then say, or the authors would say, what's the purpose of the paper? So you show that those running aid or running assistant apps are popular, are important, are making impact in people's lives. And so my particular research will then look into, are they better in aiding the continuity of, let's say, sticking up to your workout plan or something like that? Or like it will help people, does it help people lose weight? Or like, does it deter them from going to the gym, right? Or whatever specific topics, you just you got the reader's attention, you showed what topic support, and then your particular subtopic or the particular question your paper is addressing. The introductions typically take probably like 1 page, 1.5 page, or like 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs. That's it. The introduction don't take a lot of space in academic topics. Literature reviews, however, are a different story. So literature review are considered the foundation of the research. That is to say, when you start with the literature review, it will lay the ground for the method and the implications. So you say, hey, here are the theories, for instance, that I'm going to use. Like, here's what the previous research has shown about the effect of mobile apps on workouts. Therefore, here's what this study is going to propose. So to define literature review, it's like the theoretical framework. So if you remember what I mentioned about defining what theory is, so we mentioned that it's not enough to say X is related to Y. If you remember that when we talked about exploratory and explanatory, and theory is always by nature, it is explanatory. That is to say, theory explains how X leads to Y or how X is related to Y. So YX in the example I just gave would be those running apps. Why would it let people to keep like attached or sticking to the plan they put for themselves, right? You say, yeah, it facilitates that. So show us why. And that show us why part is the theory. Right? So in the literature review, you're going to review previous theories or like newly developed theories that explain the why. And so here is the full definition. The literature review is a systematic, explicit, reproducible method for identifying, evaluating, and interpreting the existing body of research. So existing body of academic or work in an academic domain. And by academic domain, meaning whatever field you're studying. So you're studying technology effects, mass media, marketing, advertising effects, celebrity culture, you name it. So whatever domain you're studying, you're reviewing what existing work has been done before you. And we do this all the time. So even outside of academia, so probably you've done secondary research before, and it's done by professionals all the time. So we do academic researchers do literature review. So you demonstrate your knowledge about any specific topic, whether you're studying media effects, whether you're studying interpersonal relationships. You demonstrate you as a scholar how much you've read or learned about this topic. Okay? Why do you think that is important? Why should someone show you that they've read enough about the topic they're talking about?
So you know,
Because you can
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, you got it.
Okay. Well, if someone has read enough information about such topic, then they will have more trust, and their information will be valued more across the world.
Yeah, yeah, credibility. Yeah, right. So the reader or even the presenter, or so the viewer, if you're presenting, when you understand, like actually you've done your homework, quote unquote. Like you actually done the reading, you know the different school of thoughts regarding the issue, so you establish credibility. That's correct. Um, and so you initiate the research question. So by reviewing, here is what previous research is doing. You sort of like, then it begs the question, what should we do next? So in other words, we've seen some research linking, let's say, downloading the app to enthusiasm about working out. So let's say that's been done. Based on that, I'm suspecting it will have an effect also in the continuity of working out or doing physical activities or running or whatever specific app you're investigating. So it initiates the research question once people see where you're heading, what concept you're using. The research question would then emerges more naturally. And so related to that, it reveals holes in the literature, or also called gaps. To give another example, let's say, for instance, and we discussed this, if you remember, on Friday, the research looking into the relationship between cell phone before going to sleep and sleeping quality. Right? So there is research that shows there is a link, right? But if you remember last time, we could not agree. Actually, I don't have my cell phone here, but we did not agree on, or we couldn't figure out what's the reason. So is it something unique about the cell phone light? And someone mentioned about the blue light, something, it does something to your brain, so you stay awake. Or it's about the content you browse on your cell phone. So if you're now writing an article about that topic, you would say, hey, here's what previous research has done, and it indeed showed a link, but previous research could not answer whether that's something related to like physical or visual elements of the cell phone design, or about the use of cell phones, right? And so saying, and that part is what my paper is going to talk about, right? So that's what literature reviews do. And also, so in non-academic settings, we use it for practical research. So we call it secondary research mostly. So so it has also that element of like showing credibility and whatnot, and that you've done your homework. So you show what have already been done in whatever something you're writing a report on. Saying you're working for an advertising agency or in politics or whatnot, then in the campaign that you're tasked with, or like with the activity you're overseeing, what previous examples, case studies, researches, even anecdotes that demonstrated some successful tools or methods for the things you're about to do. So you're launching, let's say, a big public event. What does research show about successful public events? Right? What elements should be aware of? What has been proven to get people's attention? So even if you're organizing something, you have to show that there's a basis of what you're proposing. And even let's say you're in a product design team sitting in the board around the table, and then you want to propose a change to the product packaging, or a change where you want to position your product or like the target market. Well, that proposal you're giving has to be based on some data. So showing, like, for example, other companies that have done something similar and they were successful, or previously successful campaigns by your own agency or any other agency. But there has to be some data to back your claim. Right. So here it's similar to, we do something similar to this in research. Before you claim some proposals or hypotheses or theoretical framework for your own research, you have to show similar research that's been successful in achieving the same goals you're talking. So this shows you like the importance of research, even if you're not pursuing like academic job or not planning to do at all. So here's an example. So let's say the state of California is concerned about hostility towards the COVID-19 vaccination. So probably have heard what happened at the Dodger Stadium. So some people were like disrupting the event and harassing people and pushing them away. And so let's say the state of California wants to run a communication campaign to convince people, especially senior citizens, to sign up for it. So that will make them deal with multiple questions. So how should the state run the campaign? So what budget they should assign for it? How many elements do they use? How many channels? What are the channels, right? Is it going to be TV, social media, radio, billboards, all of the above? And if it's all of the above, which proportion could be given to whichever channel, right? So that's the question. Another question is like, what's the message? So yeah, is it like, hey, take the vaccine, it's safe? And that going to be successful? So how are you actually going to formulate a message that is appealing to people who are skeptical, right? So it's a different message if you're talking to people who are willing to take it, but they don't know where to sign up versus people who are skeptical. So what message you're going to design? Are you going to use like a narrative structure, and a narrative structure? You're going to use like, like a storytelling, you're going to use celebrities, you're going to use local influencers from that community. How exactly are you going to design the message, right? So these are serious questions. And where to target, right? So are you going to directly to these communities? Are you going to send them direct messages, so maybe direct mails, and so they would see some brochures coming their way? Are you going to go out in the streets and make public service announcements? How exactly are you going to run it in terms of the logistics? So all of these questions are legitimate, and it's faced by strategic communicators all the time. And finding answers to them is not easy, but it can be done by relying on secondary research. So in other words, you look into other public health campaigns that address a similar problem. So anti-vaccine, and so the anti-vaxxers have been around for a while. And there were other campaigns for other diseases or viruses that counter that message around the globe, right? So there are campaigns done in different states of the United States, in different countries. How successful were some of these campaigns were? And if they were successful, how so? In other words, what did they do right? So if you're writing down, assuming you're now working for the state of California or like the health officials of the state of California, how are you going to convince them like, hey, my messaging strategy is going to work? You're not going to do that unless you show real backing for it, like strong backing from research. So here's what this campaign, say, the state of Oregon or the state of Washington has done. And you could see the rate of vaccination before and after. So even if it were, they were for like another viruses, But you could say if you use the same technique, so we don't really need to copy piece by piece, but if you use the same techniques, we could achieve similar results, right? So you cannot just propose something out of nowhere, like, hey, I feel this is right, but just my gut feeling that this approach is right. But you actually have to base it somewhere. And so we actually, why we do, so we actually cover this part. So what we do literature review again, so for credibility, informing people for where the research is, what has been done, and then arguing why then you think your hypothesis would work. And we talk about gaps. It's like showing what previous research has done, and then what piece the article you're writing is going to add, right? So I'm not going to over many details, but over this slide, I think we covered everything. But it's basically because this is linked to assignment 1, right? So for assignment 1, we're going to look into research articles and see how they achieve some of these goals. So how they explain the topic, how they explain what has been done, and how they explain the rationale for what they're proposing. I rather do a real example instead of sticking with hypotheticals or like with abstract meanings. But I just want to mention that the reason for this is what we mentioned before, that where do hypotheses come from? So the shorter answer is they come from literature reviews, if you remember. That's what we asked last week. Once you know what has been done, it will make you guess what the direction will be in a relevant study. And then you could propose what the hypothesis is. So let me give an example. So here, let's say I am starting a new research project, okay? And my research question is advertising about voter registration on Instagram influencing Gen Z to vote and become politically involved, right? So I'm saying is political advertising or promotion in Instagram, is it effective on making people from Gen Z? So Gen Z is you, Zoomers, the people who are between ages of now it's 14 to 21. So let's look at the variables in this research question, right? So I frame the question differently so it becomes more precise. So are political statements by Instagram celebrities, okay, affecting and pushing Gen Z to vote and become more politically involved, right? So you've probably seen some celebrities on Instagram saying, vote for that person, or like, hey, get out and register to vote, or like, I voted to encourage others to vote, things like that. And so what's the component of that? What's the variable we're studying? So here we have political advertising, that's one, or political statements. The messenger would be the Instagram celebrities, right? So then the channel is Instagram. The receiver is Generation Z, and the outcome or the feedback desired from these receivers are like going to vote and political involvement, right? So we deconstructed the research question into these pieces. And so in the introduction, if I'm about to write this paper, I have to explain the context. So why did I choose Instagram and why I'm focusing on Generation Z? So I think, yeah, Generation C is like a coming force, many people born between the years 1996 and 2004 would be eligible to vote in the coming cycles. So we should pay attention to their voting behavior. And why choosing Instagram? Because it's the most popular app or like platform for people under the age of 30. Then I can explain like the current context as well. So we've seen a large increase in the number of ad spending on places like Instagram, which has not been traditionally political, but it could be that it's becoming more political. Right? And then you should talk about celebrities and politics and things like that to get people excited. So you show that, in other words, like this topic is real, hence it requires some investigation. Like we could observe that celebrities are doing that, and those posts get maybe a lot of likes and shares and comments and media coverage. Therefore, we should investigate if this is effective at all or not. Right? Seems like a very legitimate question to ask. And so yeah, you lead with that. What made you interested in this research, which I just explained, and how this would be beneficial for people to to understand about politics. So actually, let me ask you, why do you think a research like this would be beneficial to for someone working in the strategic communication profession?
I'm just confused. What did you mean by who is the strategic communicator?
That's a good question. The strategic communicator means you work in a communication team for an entity that want to achieve a particular goal, whether it's a political entity, a commercial entity, a business entity, nonprofit, etc.
So, yeah, this information would be good to effectively launch the campaign because you need the information to know how to effectively help people. You need to know if it actually would work and how best to connect with Gen Z and the audience.
Right. So yeah. So if I want to connect with Gen Z or whatever my audience is, I need to conduct research like this to see what works and what not. And think of it even strategically. If the research showing that those political statements make no effect, then would you advise any campaign to rely on celebrities for this type of thing?
If it has no effect, then no.
Yeah. So yeah, it's actually, like we've done the research. And so don't bother wasting your money, because a lot of money, actually speaking of political ads, a lot of money, like billions of dollars literally have been spent in the last election cycle. And so if the results are super critical to you, you should optimize how you spend your money. And if something that research has shown is not effective, then you should just abandon it and look for other strategies. And so, yeah, if I'm doing the literature review, I'll then have to do multiple things. I have to explain different things. So what I mean by political advertising or political statements, what counts as a political statements or political endorsements. So if you see that picture by this couple, so do you consider this a political advertising or a political statement? So she might not be saying a specific endorsement to a party, but there is an encouragement, even if you're not reading the comment or the description she gave. Since she posted this publicly, she's telling the public, hey, I voted, you should too. So would you count this in your research as political advertising or not? Right? And then Gen Z, where did you come up as a writer? I mean, where did you come up with this term? What's the age range? Because don't assume everybody understand when you talk about let's say millennials or Gen Z, what you exactly mean. Sometimes those terms are a little bit vague, so you have to explain, hey, this is what most researchers see as the age range that I'm defining here. And then when you say political involvement, so voting or registered vote is somewhat straightforward, but when you say political involvement, what do you mean? Do you mean like advocacy, donation to campaigns or causes, like sharing news on social media? Would you consider that a political involvement? Volunteering, organizing, etc., canvassing. So yeah, you have to define when you say political involvement. What do you mean by that? That will be in the literature review, and then from that you then explain, okay, what theories could explain this, right? So you could look into the literature of, let's say, of political engagement. What are the motivations for political engagement that previous scholars have discovered? So do you find something about like social comparison maybe, and looking to people who are more successful than you for their opinions? You can talk about opinion leaders. You can talk about influence of voters by what they see on the media, things like that. So what previous theories explain the political behavior? You could also look into research. So aside from politics, you can look into research of celebrity endorsement and see what factors in celebrity endorsement make it effective or not. So there are research done on the effects of like the similarity between the endorser, the celebrity endorser, and the audience, similar in terms of taste, or similar in terms of the look, or similar in terms of the attitudes. There are different ideas about that. Or about the credibility, so what established the credibility of the celebrity, or about even the physical attractiveness. So, and I think this is no surprise for anyone. So in advertising, there is a relationship between a celebrity's physical attractiveness and then their credibility or perceived credibility. So do you suspect that this would be applied as well to political statements? So things like that, right? You take a theory, it's been applied, even if it's not addressing the same exact topic you're talking about. But overall, it's like within the same ballpark, like it's showing these effects. And I, as a researcher, would think this effect could be applied to the context I am investigating. And so, yeah, you outline first the overall theory or theoretical framework talking about, then you show what previous research has been done. So maybe there is previous research on the effect of celebrity endorsements on social media in terms of political involvement. I'm not aware of like recent research on that, but it could be. So you need to investigate before you do your research, right? What questions have been answered and what questions yet need to be answered. So yeah, that's what I mean by showing where the gap is. So assuming, for instance, there has been research done on like political advertising in social media in general. What does that research show? What's the effect? Positive, negative, neutral, or like Gen Z and political involvement? So what do we know about the political involvement of Gen Z, right? So things like that. So previous research of related topics, even if they're not exactly the same topic. Right? Well, they need to be not exactly the same, because if someone tested exactly what you're investigating, then your research is technically not adding anything, right? Because it has been done. Your research has to add some nuance, right? So that's what I mean when you say what previous projects have discovered, and then what previous research might be missing. So you could say, well, previous research into the effects of political advertising on social media, and they looked into the effects of celebrity endorsements outside of politics, right? So why don't we look into the effects of celebrity endorsements on politics on social media, right? So you synthesize different parts, saying, okay, here's what has been done, here's what I should be doing because it's missing. What's your so that's how you research on the gap, and then you state your hypothesis. So where do you think the research is going to be? The direction of the effect is going to be. So do you think those endorsements by celebrities or political statement by celebrities, do you think they would have positive effects, i.e. increasing involvement, or negative effects, i.e. decreasing involvement, right? So based on the previous research you've been done in different contexts, you should make your mind about what the hypothesis is. Is that point clear? And so yeah, if you have a theoretical support, you state the hypothesis. Sometimes, however, especially for exploratory research, mainly for exploratory research, if not enough work has been done on the topic or even related topic, you can post just research question instead of a hypothesis. Right?
I have a question.
So
So for the exercise, are you allowed to have exploratory research or only explanatory and predictory?
That's a good question. So in the exercise, if you see, I already added 4 articles you have to pick from. You cannot pick whatever article. So if you go to the assignment, I actually attached 4 different articles, if you could see it. Actually, let's do this right now. So let's do a review for assignment number 1. Let's see what the thing I'm going to talk about next anyways. So you could open the Google Doc link. It's in the Blackboard. So if you go there, you go to Blackboard. Let me stop sharing this. You should see the 4 articles. So yeah, so I have article number 1. Let me share this part. So yeah, here you can see, so you have article number 1, effects of soundtrack music on the video game experience. Article number 2, relationship among smartphone addiction, stress, generic performance, satisfaction with life. So yeah, they are here. You can download them and then answer the questions. Then if we go to the assignment, so yeah, now if you read the assignment, so you would find it, I'm asking about similar things I just talked about in today's lecture. So basically, you would only need to read, well, obviously the title, the abstract, the introduction, and the literature review. You don't need to read the method section or the findings or the implication section. You can just, yeah. So basically, you would read about 3 to 4 pages of the article out of like maybe 12 or 14 pages in the article. And most of them are actually shorter. So some of them, the introduction and literature review are only 2 pages, some of these articles, right? And so let me go over the questions. So first one is basically a giveaway. So in plain terms, what is this research or what this research is all about? So you just need to read the topic and the abstract to say, here's what this research is investigating. That's it. Sometimes, and that's what I'm asking here, saying in plain terms, i.e. try to answer in language clear for someone who's not specialized in research. explain, the authors would use somewhat academic terms. Just translate those terms into like a plain language or everyday language terms. So if they mention, for instance, like smartphone addiction, saying like, if you could say something like being over obsessed with smartphones or like over reliance with smartphones, something like that, right? So they are a few things we would need to clarify, but pretty much this is straightforward. You just say what this research is all about, all right? And then question number 2, so in the introduction section, as I mentioned in the lecture, the authors typically argue why the current research is noteworthy. What's the argument presented in this introduction for the article you picked? So why the author thinks this topic is important? Sometimes you would find that stated explicitly. So we're investigating this topic because, or this topic is worthy of attention because, or like our observation of blah 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 led us to think about the importance of then blah blah blah. So you would find, like, if not explicitly, implicitly, whatever in the first or second paragraph in the introduction, they will say or demonstrate why this research is important. So those 2 questions, first 2 are easy, I would say. Number 3 is a little bit trickier. So in the literature review, the author cite previous articles that if investigated the same or similar topic. Could you summarize the main findings of these articles? And let me point here, like the authors would list a lot of articles. You by no means have to summarize them all. Just pick like the 3 major ones. So this study found this study found that, right? So maybe only like 3 articles you cite from the literature review. So in other words, you don't have to do research yourself. This is very important. Just from the articles cited in the literature review, tell us what the main findings were, like 3 major findings. That's it. Don't need to do more than that. So that's first one. And then what did the research not able to find? What they weren't able to find, right? So the authors would say, here's what the previous research, and what they haven't found is typically would be what's in question number 1, the exact components or variables they are studying. So few of these variables have to be new, right? Otherwise, the articles would be just replicating a previous thing, which is not the case, or it should not be the case. So you would see this. Sometimes the authors would state explicitly. So they would tell you previous finding, and then they would say, however, there's a gap in the literature regarding X. Or like we see a lot of findings investigating Y. So they would tell you, here's what we know from previous research, but here's the missing piece our investigation will address. So that you, by closer reading of the literature review, you could find that. And so then for the conceptual components, look at the variables research are investigating. Some of them would be material and are like conceptual and theoretical. What are the variables, and can you explain what theories the author utilizes? So in other words, it's not really, can you point out to, so you don't need to actually explain. So when someone says, let me give you an example here from the what I meant by material and theoretical. So the effects of soundtrack music on video game experience. Does anyone need a definition of what soundtrack music is? Or is it pretty much clear, right? Right? We know what soundtrack music is. Video game experience is a little bit trickier, right? Because it's not just the playing a video game. Let's say talking about some psychological experience. So how video game experience was defined? This is actually what I'm asking. So define these vague concepts or like technical. They are technical terms, right? Here the same when they talk about satisfaction with life. How they define satisfaction with life in the article, or like stress or academic performance. So yeah, make those things more clear to the reader when you summarize in your assignment, right? So that's precisely what I mean by what I need for question number 4. Right? So you don't need to go on and on. So just list the components and define each one in plain terms. That's it. And finally, what's the main hypothesis? So the hypotheses will be actually listed explicitly. So either you would find them like on a different paragraph. So you would see hypothesis 1, blah, 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 hypothesis 2, blah, blah. Or they would say within a paragraph, like we hypothesize that, and then they will tell you what they hypothesizing about. So just tell me, and this is all linked to question number 3, how the hypothesis is logically related to previous research. So you remember, so the hypothesis should be logically related to the previous research. So here, for instance, the influence of solitary and cooperative violent video game play on aggressive and pro-social behavior. So if the researchers, I'm not analyzing the article for you, but if the researchers say, for instance, that cooperative violent video games lead to pro-social behavior, how is that related to what previous research has shown, according to the authors, right? So they would say we found cooperative gameplay effective in other contexts, and so we suspect it would be applicable to violent video game context as well. Okay? So yeah, so in order to answer question 5, you actually need to answer question number 3. So they are all related. Once you actually unlock question number 3, question number 5 would be obvious. So if you understand what the previous research has shown, according to what the authors have written, you can then tell why they thought their hypothesis would work, or why they proposed their hypothesis the way they proposed it, right? So at this point, clear so far about the 5 questions? Okay. So my advice to you is, please start with the assignment. So I know you have 5 days, and it shouldn't take you long, honestly, to answer. So the whole thing could be done like in a page and a half. So this is not a full analysis of a research article. Let me say that. So it should not take you long. But if you start, then you can come on Wednesday and on Friday or during office hours, and we can talk about more specifics, right? So I know it's hard when I'm talking about like an abstract and not about specific articles, but once you start reading those articles, those questions would become super clear to you what I meant by them. And then, yeah, if you struggle with anything, we can then discuss in particular details what I meant. Any questions regarding this one?
I have a quick question for you, Professor.
Sure. Ray.
So basically, I was just rereading your syllabus last night, and it was just a general question in regards to like, so I know we're only supposed to do 4 individual assignments. So like, obviously, would this would count as one of those, correct? Or are we required to do that? Okay, perfect. And then we can choose any 4. It just has to be 2 10 points and then 2 15-point research papers or individual assignments. Okay, perfect.
Correct.
Okay, Yeah,
Yeah.
because I was kind of confused, and when it said assignment 1 due, I was like, oh, so we have to do this. But I reread your syllabus. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I was like confused last time because like on Blackboard it had said it was due on the 31st, but then I realized it was due this Friday.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's due this Friday. Yeah, the coming Friday.
Wait, I don't know if anyone else sees this, but it says the due date for me is March 12th, instead of
Is it
February.
March 12th?
Yeah, it says March 12th, on the on
Okay.
Blackboard.
So I need to fix that. Thank you for pointing it out. Yeah,
Yeah.
there was just one number. Yeah, so I'll fix it. Yeah, it should be this Friday, like similar to what I stated in the syllabus. Cool. Any other questions, concerns, comments?
I have a quick
Yes,
question.
Fernando.
You want us to submit it as a Word doc, right? Like
Yes,
okay, what about a PDF? Just a Word doc?
PDF would work.
Okay.
So if we choose to do activity number 1, it would be due this Friday by midnight.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So you don't have any questions. Have a great day, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.